Welcome to the Harmony in a Hurry podcast. We are Caroline and Anna, mindfulness enthusiasts, exploring ways to weave a little bit of mindfulness into our busy routine. Today we are chatting with Duncan McMartin. Duncan is a man driven by a vision of a more beautiful world, one guided by the heart rather than the mind. Through childhood shaped by his parents' trauma-driven quest for change, through professional reinventions and personal rebirths, Duncan has remained a critical thinker and seeker of liberation from mental constraints. We hope you enjoy. Thank you for coming on our podcast today and come to be with us.
Absolute pleasure. I'm honoured, absolutely honoured. And Carol?
So the first question, as you probably know, that we ask our guests is, what does mindfulness mean to you?
I sat with that question over the last couple of days or since we were chatting, and there's probably a question before that is, who's being mindful? And I think that really probably speaks to what I look for with the concept of mindfulness. And I had a beautiful conversation with my granddaughter, with little Mia, her name is. So we call her Moo. So Moo and I are having these chats and we're talking about the actor. And she goes, "What's the actor, Granddad?" And I said, "Well, it's the part of us that is created for us, but not by us. It's part of us that has been created by our family, our society, our schooling, our experiences and all that sort of stuff. And it creates a bit of a lens that we look through and we actually interpret the world around us." And I said, "But what's really amazing about the actor, Moo, is the actor is up on a stage. And what we try and do is we keep feeding the actor." So linking it into your question, what does mindfulness mean to me? Who's being mindful? Is it the actor or is it the real you? And Deepak Chopra alluded to this, and he talked about the seeker. And the seeker is a fascinating one because it's the part of us that is actually trying to understand the world around us. But it's actually the part of us is still part of the act. And the thing about the seeker is always looking to get away from discomfort. It's trying to look at a way of actually starting to find a point in us that is actually peaceful. But it doesn't realize to actually move away from discomfort, you've actually got to move towards it. And so what I find with a lot of mindfulness, I was always known for many years as the meditator. I'd meditate for an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours a day. Did that religiously until I actually started feeling real guilt and shame if I even thought about not meditating for a day. And I went, how's that working? And so I guess when I look at what mindfulness is, for the actor, mindfulness is about everything being perfect around us, the outside world being perfect around us. It's me feeling comfortable in myself for a lot of the time. Whereas the real person is actually okay with what is. And so a lot of the times when we look at mindfulness, it's actually about trying to go on this journey, but not realizing you're already there. So this idea of actually seeking peace or seeking joy or seeking that, the real state is the I am state. I am joy. I am peace. I am happiness. And that's probably where I go for with the understanding of mindfulness. It's not so much practices per se, but it's actually the recognition that, am I seeking it or is it already here? And how do I actually get in relationship with it? A roundabout way of answering your question.
So obviously you said you were meditating like an hour and a half a day, which to me is already poof. Is that what you do nowadays? Do you still practice that?
No, what I do, and this probably links into is, so let's take a day, you wake up in the morning, you might have woken up at 3:30 in the morning, seems to be a really good witching hour. You're churning, there's an anxiety pumping through the roof, your body's feeling really sort of irritated and all that. The first thing a lot of the mindfulness practices do is try to get rid of that. And I've seen that happen over and over. And that's how I used to use it, try and get rid of it. I remember in the deepest, darkest state that I was in, which was the suicidal state where I actually attempted suicide, is that I would try and get rid of the discomfort that I was in. And I was living up in Noosa at the time, and I would wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd run. And I'd run and run and run until my mind stopped whirring. And that could be 16 Ks. I think I did nearly 20 Ks one time. And I'd just do that night after night after night until I shut my mind up. But I was forcing an outcome with it. And I got fit, which was really good. But I also, and it did quieten my mind. And it did help because I was blowing off these catecholamines, all this stuff that was sitting in my body. But what actually really started to change for me is when I started to go within. I started to have a really good look. I sat with the discomfort. And so my practice now, if I had a practice, is when something happens within my body or I'm triggered by something, rather than push it away, I take I do this thing, and it's not a conscious thing all the time, but it's like I'm sitting on a log with a fire in front of me, and there's this dark forest sitting behind the fire. And out from behind a tree pops the discomfort. And instead of saying go away or creating a practice where I actually make the fire bigger and just don't want to see it, I go, come on, come and sit with me. You can be with me. And so the practice I'll say is that you can be in my body. Shame, you can be in my body. Discomfort, you can be in my body. Anger, you can be in my body. And I just let it be there. I don't try and change it or fix it. And so what I do is I bring awareness in each moment.
How do you come from trying to commit suicide? What got you out of that situation or that mental state into happy and peace?
Great question. And I had this beautiful guy that I actually saw. He was a counselor, psychologist, I think he was at the time. Young guy, but just a beautiful soul. And he said, Duncan, you got a seesaw. And he said, good shit, bad shit. Can I swear on this? Sorry. Good stuff, bad stuff. And what happens is, he says, in life, you're pretty well fine. Right? So you got your fulcrum there. And what actually happens is that when you go into the point that I was at, is that any good stuff that's put on the high point, it just slides down to the bad point. So you can't receive anything. He said, what we need to do, we need to put a block under the bad side and lift it up. And I just realized that block was just surrender. And at that point in time, I said, everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. I let go of all my beliefs, my prejudice, anything. I just let it all go. And I said, everything's on the table. And whatever direction I need to take, I'll take. Now, at that point in time, I did about 6 weeks of antidepressants, and I went, can't do that. I need to feel, I need to feel this. I need to feel what I'm going through. So I got rid of those pretty quick. Well, I reduced them down. I had enough sense to be able to do that. And I needed to feel into exactly what was happening but the surrender was the point. I didn't have all the answers outside of me. I surrendered that I would have all the answers within me.
I think a lot of people confuse mindfulness with the practices versus mindfulness. I guess the original definition is to accept what's happening without wanting to change it and without judgment, which is what you were saying about being aware and being okay with the discomfort. And in that sense, you were already embodying mindfulness by saying, I need to feel instead of numb what I'm going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at mindfulness, for example, mindfulness is the knowing of who you are. You move away from the looking for happiness outside of you or love outside of you, and you say, I am love. I am happiness. So if I am that, what's happening that I'm not in relationship with that? Show me more. And so what will happen from that is that you may not necessarily have a habitual practice that you'll do in that point in time. It may be, I just need to have quiet, or I actually need to go for a walk, or I need to have a fast. In that moment, there's a plethora of things that'll come available to you. But you've actually got to sit there in that moment and go, all right, what is going on here? Why aren't I in relationship with that? Once you're in relationship with that, you go, okay, is there a doing I need to do with that?
So from listening to what you're saying, what's there, what do I need to do, to actually trusting that voice is the one that you have to listen versus your ego or versus your actor, like you were saying before. What is the process to come
to learn which is the voice that you have to listen to, or the voice that actually is true.
Yeah. I love this because it really does sort of point to that most of us have created a life around us that actually reinforces the limitations that we have within, the perceived limitations we have within. And so when you start to begin to get to know who you are, or the knowing of who you are, the outside world becomes an irritant in some respects. You find the relationships you've had may not actually be what you want. The job that you have may not be the one you want. And the biggest thing that then happens with that is your mind will jump into it and you'll move away from knowing, just that intuitive thing. It's just like, I'm just not living the life I really want to live. But your mind will come into it and say, but you're going to lose the house, you're going to lose your car, you're going to lose your job. As you get to a deeper relationship with yourself, does the external world that you've created based on the old personality need to collapse? And the answer to that is yes and no. I think it'll go through a fire. Like you see those fires go through an old homestead out in the bush, and all that's left standing is a chimney and a concrete foundation and maybe a one brick wall, but everything else is just burnt. And you've got to be okay with starting there. But the reason why people won't go there, they won't listen to their intuition, is because the voice in their head is trying to keep them safe in the world that they've created around them. Then what'll come, your mind will go, well, hang on a second, you've got a house, you've got a car, you've got this, you've got kids, you've got all this sort of stuff in the background. And so what comes in is fear. And so that gives you a bit of an indication if you're not listening to your intuition, because there's fear. So intuition has no fear. The mind does. Roundabout way of answering you.
So if someone that was new to mindfulness and was looking to start or find their way, from your perspective, what would you think would be a good place to start?
Do you know what I reckon? Read the 5 Love Languages book. Find out what love language you are. And at the end of it, ask yourself, why am I like that? Good place to start. Because I think what that does is it actually gets you to start to realize your beliefs. The biggest entry point into knowing who you are is your beliefs. What do you really believe? What are your prejudices? What are your biases? And if you can start to go from that, if you can start to look from that perspective, I mean, it could be the most simplest thing of walking. I did this the other day, actually, walking along the break wall, and I went, if I'm in judgment, I'm not receiving. It was just this little thing that I sort of got. And so I thought, how are people, as they're walking towards me, receiving me? If I'm looking at them, the color of their hair, the shoes or no shoes, shape of their body, the gait, whether they're smoking or not smoking, whatever it is, if I'm in this judgment state, I'm not in a receiving thing. So what I looked at was, how do I receive? How am I being received? And I just went, from that perspective, I'm just going to be just completely open. And as I'm walking, the amount of conversations I had with people was off the Richter scale. And so for me, it was an awareness in myself that I was actually in a judgmental mindset. So this came into this awareness you've got to have of what are you actually believing here? What sides are you taking? Do you believe the world is a dangerous place? That's a good place to start from a mindfulness space. Because if you believe the world is a dangerous place, then you're working from a totality mentality. There's dangers in it. I wouldn't go swimming painted in blood out from Nambucca Heads. There's a few sharks out there, right? But the ocean's the most incredible place. So it's this awareness of the world that you actually have around you is, what are my beliefs? And so if you want a mindfulness practice, if you want to work on mindfulness, I'd be working on with the main focus of actually meeting the parts of you that you don't want to see, not the parts of you that you want to see. you know, they're the thing. That's where the nutrient dense components of you are, is actually moving into those parts. And so what I would encourage people to do from a mindfulness practice is actually use it to look at the parts of you that you don't want to see and love them and love them. Bring them to the fire, like I used as the analogy, where you sit them next to you on the log and say, you know, shame, guilt, fear, anxiety, you can be with me. You have permission to be with me. Now, straight away, focus on those, the uncomfortable parts of you, because that's where liberation really comes in.
That feels like the advanced model because that's what everybody's trying to numb, whether it's with, outside ambitions or drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. All of those parts that we don't want to look at are what people are actively avoiding in our society, really.
Oh, absolutely. Look, children are born with the primal reflexes. We see it, you put your finger in a baby's hand and they've got this grasp reflex. It's called the palmar reflex. So you've got the Galant, you've got Babinski. There's so many reflexes that a child actually has. They're in these innate reflexes. And the idea of those is that through movement, that they'll actually be metabolized into postural control. And not only that, the distance the child crawls at is the same distance they read at. So you're myelinating pathways in the brain, you're getting the left and the right hemispheres to interconnect and all those movement parts. So all these things, we disrupt it and we don't let them do brachiation and stuff now because it's too dangerous. But these things, there's a reflex there. But we also have this reflex of the knowing, or we also have this primal knowing, this core knowing of ease. And so the mind can't get ease. So it'll go for numbness. All right. And numbness can be anything. Numbness can be distraction, entertainment, sex, booze. It could be sleep. Sleep is a type of numbness. You actually shut yourself down and you reboot yourself. Right? It's a type of numbness. It's not bad. Numbness isn't a bad thing. But as my beautiful late mother used to say, all things are lawful, not everything's expedient. So basically, the overindulging of things can be where the issue comes in. But there is, what it's actually pointing to is this knowing there's this place called ease. And ease and bliss are very similar in the effect in them. And there's actually 3 words you can utter that'll actually elicit that. And if you're ready for them, 3 words. It's, I am enough. If you just say that to yourself, I am enough, you'll actually feel this glow just kick in. And it's like, I'm enough. I am enough. And then straight away, there's peace just with those 3 words.
Only if you believe them.
Yeah. But I think intention, they talk about action and intention. You can screw up action, but if the intention's pure, the outcome will actually end up being expansive. And so if your intention is to actually recognize the knowing of who you are and understand what ease is, then you start uttering those words, you'll actually start to everyone's got like this little coal. You ever done camping and overnight and the next morning you get up and the campfire's out and you go, I light the campfire. Oh no, I've got no matches. And you go, heaven's sake. And you look down and you see this one little coal. And all you have to do is just blow on it gently. And it just illuminates a little bit. And you just put a little stick on that and you just blow on it gently and it illuminates. And a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And before you know it, you have this massive, massive glowing, warming fire. So even if you don't believe I am enough, you just start uttering those words, I am enough. And you look at it and again, a lot of the Christian sort of faith gets this thing, they have an external based salvation. It's actually internal. The kingdom of heaven is within. It actually says it in their Bible sort of thing. So the knowing of who you are is within. All peace lies within. And if God is omnipresent, where does hell exist? It's got to exist in heaven as well. So we've actually got to be able to bring all those parts of us forward. And we've got to get to know all of them. But I am enough, yeah. I guess the fundamental things, understand the concept of entrainment. Just have a look at what entrainment is. So you've ever seen that thing where they get about 100 metronomes? I think it's about 140 I've seen. There's metronomes they use for music? And they get 140 of them on a table and they flick them at all different random speeds. And they all, over about a 2-minute time, they all come into synchrony. And you're going, isn't that amazing? There's an entrainment going on there, but what are they entraining to? And the old clockmakers, the old ones that used to make those beautiful ornate clocks that had the pendulum within them, what they were finding was in the shop, all the clocks over time would entrain themselves to the same synchrony. And you're going, well, what are they entraining to? It was the clock with the largest mass. So what I started to understand from that is, and this is what I was teaching my granddaughter about, is that you are the greatest mass. It's not what you do. It's not outside of you. You're entraining yourself to a familial and societal based identity, or entraining yourself to the knowing of who you are. I don't know who I am. Great, start there.
Where would you point someone that thinks, I don't know who I am anymore?
Be okay with, I don't know who I am, and I love that. Just even say those. I don't know who I am, and I love that. Because all of a sudden now you've got awareness, and that's who you are. So the Deepak Chopra talks about the seeker, enter the seeker. But the real state of you is the seer. You're not the actor on the stage. The actor on the stage is the seeker. The seer is the one that sits in the audience and chooses to move out of the theatre. That's the knowing of who you are. So where you go, I don't know who I am, and I love that. Now you're working the entrainment model straight away. Because what is love? Love is you. You actually are love. It's not, you don't get love from other people. You are love. You can express from a level of love, but you are love. So merely saying, I'm so lost, and I love that. Now you're in training. You're working the entrainment model. That's how you do it. And you keep doing that, and you keep doing that. You know, if you need to get a bit of space, do a bit of meditation, do a bit of sound therapy, do a bit of breath work, do a bit of cold plunging. There's a plethora of practices out there that may give you just that little, because sometimes you're here with life and you just need to just create just that little bit of space, you know, and sometimes just taking a walk might just give you just that little bit of space. It's like taking a breath, you know, you just take a breath, and then you just go, and I don't know who I am, and I love that. Now, who's the one that's loving that? Now, if you want to know who you are, for 30 seconds, observe your thoughts. And at the end of those 30 seconds, say, am I my thoughts, or am I the observer of my thoughts? Well, you're the observer of your thoughts. Great. And so you bring everything to the fire. Let's bring it all to the fire. You're not trying to get rid of anything. Don't try and get rid of anything. You know, if you're an alchemist and you're turning lead into gold, why would you get rid of lead if that can be turned into the richness of gold? Wouldn't you actually utilize that lead? You wouldn't get rid of it. So this is what we spend all our life focusing on the gold, and we don't realize all this lead is actually an acid. All right. You won't chew it because it's toxic. All right. But you keep bringing it through the fire, and you just keep passing it through. And the fire is just bringing it to the knowing of who you are. So I don't know who I am, and I love that.
Thank you so much, Duncan, for coming.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. I love what you guys are doing, and I love what the invitation's about. You know, for me, it's just, I really just encourage people to just take it further.
And that's it for this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. As always, the show notes is where you find more about Duncan, and also where you find more about Caroline and myself. If you found this episode helpful, please share, subscribe, and help us reach more people. Thank you.